I'll take a quick moment to introduce BDO in East Africa and BDO Network as a whole, of who we are and what we do, and where are our strengths and opportunities where we can collaborate. BDO East Africa exists in all our 5 offices, 5 countries in East Africa. We are in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. We are also in Ethiopia, and we have remote offices in both Sudan, Somalia, and soon opening in Burundi and DRC. Our BDO seamless global approach allows us to serve clients through a central point of contact, granting access to relevant experience across borders to be where and when our clients need us. BDO East Africa is part of BDO Network, one of the largest advisory services network in the world. BDO strength is derived from our structure as a cohesive global network and dedication to internal integration. In each country, BDO member firms are composed of people who are knowledgeable about national laws and business customs and familiar with local and international business methods. As our clients expand globally, access to our international network can help them do business with a depth of experience in international matters, significant resources, and international client service capabilities. In East Africa, we offer a full range of services, audit assurance, business service outsourcing, taxation services, and advisory services. And specifically, I'll focus on advisory services because this is the team that is offering this series of webinar today. We have a risk advisories unit, which has internal audit, risk management, and forensic services. We have corporate advisory unit that focuses on corporate recovery, corporate finance, transaction advisory services. And we have the tech team that focuses on technology advisory, data privacy advisory, and business intelligence. And the advisory team, or the tech advisory team, is hosting this webinar series. Our journey on this series has been over a series of 5 webinars, and we've focused on data protection. And as we are all aware, data protection has emerged as a critical aspect of governance, spurred by rapid technological advancement and increased concern over privacy and security. We've seen a number of cases within the region and also in Kenya where the data protection team authority has decided to take a number of entities to court and have succeeded in rewarding the concerned of hefty sums of money. So before we dive into today's topic, let's take a moment and look at the journey that we've traveled through the series that we've offered. We started off with data protection compliance, where our focus was on the evolution of data protection compliance within the region. And we looked at the big picture, the historical context, the key developments, and where we stand now, each of the countries within the region. That session was all about giving us a strong base build on. The next thing we looked at as a part 2 series, we focused on the role of data protection officers across the region. We moved into the more specific aspect on the data protection officers, which any of the entities that requires to comply needs to ensure that we have DPOs, the challenges that they face, and the best practices to navigate those challenges. We shared real life scenarios where the DPOs have made significant impact in safeguarding personal data within the organization. Part 3 focused on data protection for small and medium enterprises. And we dedicated the session to SMEs because they're unique in how they protect their data because of the systems that they're using. And we discussed practical, cost-effective strategies that the SMEs would use to ensure that they navigate through any breaches or regulatory requirements facing them. Part 4, which was our last session in August, we brought into perspective the intersections of emerging technologies and data protection. We explored how technology like AI, blockchain, can be used in the changing landscape of data protection, recognizing that there are both opportunities and risks that these technologies are bringing into organization, and how can we leverage them while staying compliant with the regulation. Today's focus is cross-border data transfers, and it's the final part of our series, and we'll be tackling one of the complex and timely issues in data protection, which essentially relates to how do we manage data that is being shared beyond borders. As businesses are expanding globally, we need to consider how we are transferring data, and it's critical to ensure that we consider the dynamics that relates to data transfers, because essentially what happens is you're finding ourselves at a crossroad because your service providers may be entities that are not within your boundaries, and you have to ensure that you have to take the necessary measures to ensure that you handle and take care of the challenges that come along that. So Paul Mataria, who I'll be inviting in a few, will be taking us through this session so that we have a comprehensive understanding of the challenges and the solutions that are related to cross-border data transfer, so that all of us are equipped with the necessary practical strategies that are necessary to navigate those complexities. Thank you for being part of this journey. And without much ado, I'll pass the ball over to Paul Macharia to navigate us through today's session. Over to you, Paul.
All right. Thank you, George. And thank you for taking us through the series. So today, as we wind up the series, we will be discussing cross-border data transfers. As we all know, data protection refers to the set of strategies, practices, and technologies employed to safeguard privacy, integrity, and availability of data. It encompasses various measures to ensure that data is protected from unauthorized access, corruption, or loss. Cross-border data transfers refers to the movement of personal or organizational data from one country to another, and this can involve the transfer of customer data, employee records, financial information, or even intellectual property. In today's global economy, businesses are increasingly interconnected, whether through cloud services, international partnerships, or global operations. The need to transfer data across borders has become a necessity for most organizations. Cross-border data transfers have become the lifeblood of modern global businesses and operations. And let's get into what we can consider as a global data transfer. So in today's global economy, as we have indicated, cross-border data transfers have various roles, and they function across various industries. So some of the key and common cross-border data transfers are financial data transfers, and this includes banking transactions between different banks so as to process international payments, conduct currency exchanges, or even have financial reporting. There's also credit card processing, moving customer payment information across borders because of the ability to use their credit cards. And then there's the most important bit, which is financial reporting, and this is country-to-country reporting. And this is the consolidated financial data from regional countries, or it can even be from regional offices to global headquarters for purposes of analysis and reporting. A good example being BDO. We also have employee and HR data transfers, either for processing of payroll, employee records, or even just to enable global mobility, which means handling data related to international assignments, such as visa and tax records that are utilized across borders. The most common one, and everyone knows, is customer and marketing data. And this is service records, support tickets to global centers for resolution, can also be data or sharing customer data with regional teams for targeted advertising, or even those companies who have loyalty programs, moving data between various regions to ensure consistent rewards and benefits. And we see this a lot with the airlines. We have some supply chain and logistic data transfers, and this covers mostly inventory management, shipping tracking, as well as supplier data. An example here is DHL. We have R&D, which is research and development data, and this spans across clinical data, clinical trials data, and this was very evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have product development. This is because some products are designed in one country and then are manufactured in another. An example being Apple products, iPhones. We have also the legal and compliance data transfers, and the regulatory compliance, such as GDPR and HIPAA, the one that takes into account medical data. There's a lot of transfers across various jurisdictions. We have IT and data security transfers, and these are data backups, cybersecurity monitoring, and also system integration, especially if you're integrating to cloud environments. The next one is cloud computing and software as a service based SaaS data transfers. So cloud storage, this is when you're transferring data from one cloud provider to another, or even within the same cloud provider who have data centers worldwide. We have data that is moving from one SaaS platform to another, and this is probably hosted in various regions. And we also have content delivery networks. This is data to ensure that fast access for global users, especially if you have a centralized operation. We have educational and academic data transfers, and these are like student records when you're transferring a student between universities or in the international schools, where you are able to catch up on your curriculum across any country. There's also research collaboration. This is between higher learning institutions so as to collaborate on projects. And we also have the online learning platforms to allow data to be accessed by online students across various countries. We have media, we have manufacturing, we have also government and public sector data. And this is citizen data, which in most cases is sharing citizen records between various government agencies internationally. And we see this a lot when you're trying to process our visas or crossing into another country. There's always an element of cross-border transfer of data. There's also importance for international cooperation, and this is due to some countries that have treaties or even diplomatic communications. They utilize cross-border data transfers, and we see this a lot even across Interpol as an institution. So these are some of the data transfers that are essential for supporting global operations, ensuring compliance, and also enhancing collaboration across borders. By understanding and managing these transfers effectively, organizations can properly thrive in the internet-connected world that we live in today. So let's look into why cross-border transfers are so important. So first and foremost is to enable global business operations. And in this case is to ensure that there's seamless communication across borders, creating effective supply chain management processes, as well as financial transactions and reporting. We have an example of a multinational corporation, such as Safaricom, that needs to share strategic business plans between its headquarters in Kenya and its regional offices across South Africa and Europe in the Vodacom environment. And this might include transfer of sensitive financial data, market research, executive communications, all which need to be synchronized to ensure that the company's global strategy is effectively managed. Another example is a logistics company managing the shipment of goods between Asia and Europe and Africa, and then therefore uses cross-border data transfer to share the existing inventory with warehouses to ensure that the supply chain is not broken. We move on to supporting cloud computing and digital services. And here we know there's the importance of global access to data and services. And this is because an example being a fintech company that has deployed its environment on AWS, Amazon Web Services. may store its customer data in a data center which is located in Ireland for processing. So this setup allows the company to leverage on advanced cloud services such as AI and ML, and to also operate in very regulated environments. Another one is facilitating innovation and interoperability and international collaboration. And we've seen this in a lot of R&D innovation. I spoke about the COVID factor where we had so many variants that were being coming out of nowhere, and it was important to share this information across various jurisdictions. And it did involve, in some cases, personal data. We also have enhancing customer experience, and this is to understand customer behavior, provide consistent service across borders, and to ensure that there's personalized marketing and targeting. An example here being a fashion brand that uses data from customers in Africa, Europe, North America to create personalized marketing campaigns, especially due to the changing seasons. So warmer climate environments get targeted marketing, whereas the cold climates, which again rotate over the year, they get to also get their share of targeted marketing. Last but not least is complying with international standards and regulations. And this is because there's a need to meet global compliance. This is either EU-based GDPR, American-based CCPA, Asian law, or even just local Africa law, which we will discuss as part of the Malabo Convention. So we move on to key drivers. The key drivers, number one being economic globalization, and this involves integration of national economies, facilitation of global trade, and global supply chains. On the aspect of innovation and collaboration is to ensure that there's an environment that fosters international partnerships, especially for security purposes, access to global talent. This is with regards to education, as well as ensure that global R&D initiatives are being exchanged across borders. On the regulatory compliance and risk management aspect, there's importance to comply with international regulations and respect laws of other countries. And this helps in managing global risks and building transparency and accountability within our organizations. There's the aspect of technological advancement and digital transformation, where adoption of emerging technologies has now become the norm. Everyone is talking about AI, machine learning, and the global ecosystems, the digital ecosystems, have us interconnected within various devices. You can have a profile on your laptop, on your mobile phone, on your smartwatch, on your earbuds, all maintaining within the same ecosystem. And this helps with data-driven decision making. Today, our focus is purely on the challenges of cross-border data transfers. And as we delve into these challenges, it is important to recognize the complexities that the businesses face in this area. First off, we've spoken about regulatory complexity. Navigating the various data protection laws across various countries is one of the most significant challenges. What is permissible in one jurisdiction may not be permissible in another. Therefore, that creates a complex landscape for companies which operate in these two different jurisdictions. There's also the issue of security risks. So data in transit is particularly always vulnerable to interception, to breach, and also unauthorized access, especially if it is crossing borders. And ensuring that the security of integrity of this data during the transfers is critical to avoid any penalties or even financial or reputational damage. There's also the operational aspect of it. Managing cross-border data transfers can be very costly, requiring some substantial investment in legal expertise, compliance tools, secure data transfer technologies, which some small and medium-sized enterprises cannot be able to afford or can be very burdensome to them. These challenges highlight the need for businesses to approach cross-border data transfers with careful planning and robust strategies to mitigate these risks. We will be looking at some case studies, and we separate them into three. So today's focus will be on we've been able to just group them into three main challenges, this being legal, technical, and operational. So legal challenges are what we look at from a legal landscape. And this is because cross-border data transfers require compliance with a patchwork of laws and regulations from different countries, each with its own requirements. We have the technical challenges, which we explore the technical side of things, and this is the actual aspect of transferring data across borders electronically. We're not talking about physical data transfer, it's only electronic data transfer. And the operational challenges, which is how do we manage the day-to-day complexities of cross-border data transfers, from the cost of compliance to the need for robust frameworks. We will also look at what it takes to keep these transfers secure and efficient. Why does this all matter? Well, as we've seen throughout this series, data protection is not just a legal requirement, it's also a critical aspect of doing business in today's global economy, the digital economy. So understanding how to manage cross-border data transfers securely and compliantly is crucial to organizations to ensure, and those especially who are looking to expand into international and crossing their borders. First, we look at now the navigating the legal landscape. So the cross-border data transfers are subjected to a complex web of legal requirements and regulations, and understanding these challenges is crucial for businesses to ensure compliance and avoid penalties. So we start off with GDPR. The GDPR is one of the most stringent data protection laws globally, and it has a significant impact on cross-border data transfers. It also regulates the transfer of personal data outside the European Economic Area to ensure that such data is afforded the same level of protection as it is within the EU. So GDPR mandates that data can only be transferred to countries that provide an adequate level of protection or through specific mechanisms such as standard contractual clauses, binding corporate rules, or even having to obtain explicit consent from the data subject, which sometimes is very, very difficult. We will look at some of the case studies, and we have one which touches on this. And number two is now what we know as the Africa Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, also known as the Malabo Convention. So this aims to establish a harmonized legal framework for cybersecurity and data protection in and around Africa. It sets out the principles for data protection, including the need for transparency, consent, and data security. While the convention has not been widely ratified, it still represents a significant step towards creating a consistent data protection regime across the continent, influencing how data is being transferred between African countries as well as beyond. We also have the local data protection laws. So several countries in East Africa have already enacted their own data protection laws, which impose specific requirements for the data transfer of personal data across its borders. We looked at this in part one of the series, and we urge that if you missed that part, you can just check out our YouTube channel and you can go through the series. So the second bit is compliance complexity. This is because of the varying legal requirements across various jurisdictions. And this is becoming one of the biggest challenges in cross-border data transfers because you need to comply with various legal requirements across various jurisdictions. So if you have Kenya and Uganda as your operational countries, you need to comply to both the laws in both countries. There's also the cross-border data transfer mechanisms. So for us to comply with international data protection laws, businesses must often use specific legal tools or legal instruments to facilitate cross-border data transfers. And this includes standard contractual clauses, which are abbreviated as SCCs, binding corporate rules, which are abbreviated as BCRs, and adequacy decisions, which we will discuss as part of today's webinar. There's also the headache of data localization. So some countries have enacted data localization laws that require certain types of data, especially financial records and health records, to be stored and processed only within its country's borders. And these requirements can complicate cross-border data transfers, as businesses must first find ways to comply with the localization law while still meeting the operational needs. If you're planning on moving to cloud, for example, and your country does not have a localized data center, and you have to store this maybe in Ireland, Australia, the US, then you'd be very limited because your country is specifically barring you from this. There's also the legal risks and penalties. So while you're attempting to comply to your country, you may be failing to comply with the other country, and therefore you will be penalized with either penalties or even fines. So failure to comply with data protection regulations can result in high penalties, including very hefty fines, legal action, and reputational damage, which can never be reversed. There's also the aspect of data breach liability. So in the event of data breach during a cross-border data transfer, businesses may be held accountable and can be liable for the resulting damages. This liability can extend both to the sending party as well as the receiving party. So you end up getting penalized twice. And there's also conflict between data protection law enforcement requirements, which businesses may face because various data protection laws, particularly when dealing with requests from data from a government authority, which sits in a different country. So this is one of the major challenges if you're trying to penetrate a new market, and that particular government is requesting for information that about your company, which does not yet have legal presence, and this becomes a requirement for either business registration, which is a very big challenge. So let's look at the Malabo Convention. So, because in the context of today's webinar, we are mostly focusing on East Africa, Africa, and the world. So the biggest talking point is most of the companies we serve or in the African environment have presence in East Africa, or if you're in South Africa, you have presence in various countries. The Malabo Convention is officially known as the Africa Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. And this is a significant legal framework that aims to harmonize cybersecurity laws and personal data protection across Africa. It was adopted in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, hence the name Malabo Convention, and this was in June of 2014. And this represents the comprehensive effort to address the challenges posed by the digital age, including cybercrime, data breaches, and protection of personal data. So while the Malabo Convention has been signed by several AU states, ratification and full implementation has also been very slow over the past 10 years. Only a few countries have ratified the convention, which means it has not yet been widely enforced across the continent. However, the convention remains a critical step towards creating a consistent and robust legal framework and cybersecurity framework for data protection across the whole of Africa. Some of the countries that have passed the act include Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Uganda, Morocco, Mauritius, Tunisia, Rwanda, Zambia, Seychelles, Togo, Zimbabwe. And the fact that these countries have data protection acts makes it easier for whoever is transferring data across these countries to implement very limited tools, because it is assumed that these countries having these acts and having these laws in place are effectively managing data privacy and have embedded this into their legislation. There are some countries which are still in the process of developing or implementing a data protection legislation, such as Ethiopia, which still has the draft personal data protection proclamation, is still under discussion. We also have Malawi, the draft bill is also under consideration. Namibia has the bill, but it's still under review. We also have Botswana that had the data protection bill that was passed in 2018, but is still awaiting full implementation. The Eswatini still has a draft bill. Gambia has a bill under discussion. I think it's still in parliament. We have Lesotho, which the draft bill is still under review. Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania, they have already drafted the bill. The bill has passed, but the frameworks are still not well embedded or well included in the operational side of things. have Burkina Faso, we have also Senegal, which has existing data protection guidelines, but is working on updates and enhancements into a full act. We have some countries with partial and have limited data protection regulations, and these are Algeria. There's no sector-specific regulation with efforts to develop comprehensive legislation across these countries. And as we know, Sudan, the limited regulations are in place, but there are ongoing efforts to enhance protection frameworks. The countries in the first column, you would have it easier to transfer data to them in and out of your country as long as you have operations in Africa and you're not dealing with data from EU or the US or Asia. The column 2 is you need to add additional safeguards before you commit to a cross-border data transfer. And in column 3, it is probably prudent to avoid cross-border data transfers until those legislations or those jurisdictions implement robust protection frameworks or acts. We have set out some scenarios for which we wanted to discuss here. And scenario 1 is a Kenyan e-commerce company that has recently expanded its operations to Europe and therefore allowing EU citizens to purchase goods through its online platform. So this expansion requires the company to comply with the EU's GDPR, which has stringent requirements for data protection and cross-border data transfers, as well as complying with the Kenyan Data Protection Act. So the challenge here is that the company collects personal data from EU customers, including their names, addresses, payment details, and browsing behavior. Under GDPR, the company must ensure that the transfer of this data outside the EU complies with the regulations requirements. So the Kenyan company does not have any data centers in the EU and does not plan to set up any data centers in the EU. Instead, because they have data centers in Kenya, they plan to transfer this data for processing here in Kenya. So what solution would we recommend for such a company? The company should implement standard contractual clauses in its agreement with data processors and partners to ensure that the transfer of personal data from the EU to Kenya is legally compliant. Additionally, the company should provide clear privacy notices to customers, informing them of the data transfer and the rights under the GDPR as well as the Kenya Data Protection Act. Specifically, they need to conduct a data protection impact assessment to identify and mitigate any risks that can be included into the data transfer. By implementing this and having a DPIA ensures transparency with customers, the company can be able to navigate both the GDPR requirements while still maintaining its ability to process EU customer data here in Kenya. Another scenario is a financial institution in South Africa, which operates in multiple African countries and plans to centralize its data processing activities by transferring customer data to a cloud service provider based in another African country. However, the institution faces data localization laws in one of those countries where it operates in, which require financial data to be stored and processed within those particular countries' borders. The financial institution is faced with the challenge that they need to comply with data localization requirements, while at the same time trying to obtain operational efficiency. So the institution explores the possibility of using local data centers within that particular country to comply with its data localization law, while still leveraging on the other countries to move them into the cloud. Another scenario is a multinational corporation with cross-jurisdictional compliance. And this is a multinational corporation that has operations in Kenya, South Africa, Europe, and it always regularly transfers data across these jurisdictions and also customer information as well as financial records between its offices in this region. So it needs to comply with at least 3 jurisdictions. It's the Kenya Data Protection Act, the GDPR in EU, and the POPIA in South Africa, the Protection of Personal Information Act. The challenge here is the corporation has to basically understand multiple jurisdictions and also is required to have explicit consent for data transfers because South Africa's POPIA focuses on the conditions under which personal information can be processed, and the Kenya data protection requires safeguards for cross-border data transfers. The outcome here is they need to adopt a unified data protection approach that meets both the GDPR, the POPIA, and also the KDPA 2019. And the only way to do this is to ensure that you have a compliance strategy that does not only minimizes the risks, but also ensures that the corporation can continue to operate seamlessly across these global jurisdictions. I will move on to technical because again, we might be short of time. And the technical challenges is the second bit of the challenges that we encompass. And number one, in this case, is data security risks during the transfer. As data is crossing international borders, it may become vulnerable to cyber attacks, hacking, also data interception, and even unauthorized access. Ensuring the data is protected from such threats is very critical to maintaining confidentiality. There's also the aspect of encryption and data protection. So encryption is a fundamental tool for ensuring data is secured during the cross-border transfer. By encrypting data before it is transmitted, organizations can ensure that even if the data is intercepted, it cannot be read or used without the correct decryption key. There's also data breaches and incident responses. So in the event of a data breach during a cross-border data transfer, the consequences can be very severe, including legal penalties, financial losses, and also reputational damage. Organizations must have a very robust incident response plan to take into place how to detect, respond, and mitigate the effects of a breach, especially on data that is in transit. Number two is in infrastructure and connectivity issues. So we have inconsistent network quality across various jurisdictions. So the quality of internet and network infrastructure can vary between various countries, particularly in regions with less developed infrastructure. So inconsistent network quality can lead to delays, data loss, and also reduced reliability during the cross-border data transfer. Businesses must account for these differences and implement strategies to ensure that data transfers are as reliable and efficient as possible, regardless of the infrastructure in place. There's also the aspect of data latency and bandwidth constraints. So data latency refers to the delay in data transmission, which can then be exacerbated by long distances as well as bandwidth constraints. So high latency and limited bandwidth can negatively impact the performance of real-time applications, such as video conferencing applications like the one we're using today, online gaming, or even financial trading platforms during this cross-border data transfer. Businesses need to carefully plan and manage their data transfer operations to minimize latency and maximize on its bandwidth usage. There's also the aspect of infrastructure incompatibility. So compatibility between IT infrastructures across countries is another technical challenge in cross-border data transfers. We see this a lot with companies who have very old data centers or very old equipment in one country and state-of-the-art in another. These differences in technology standards, protocols, systems, and can create barriers to seamless data exchange. And organizations must ensure that their systems are compatible with those other regions where they're transferring data to, so that it can be transferred smoothly without any technical issues. Compliance and technical standards and regulations. So because some countries have varied encryption standards, some would give a bare minimum of AES 256, others would go all the way up to 512 and above. So there's certain countries that have a very high encryption standard, which other countries are not able to meet. There's data residency and localization laws, which I have spoken about, as well as the cross-border data transfer protocols. And implementing secure and efficient cross-border data transfer protocols is essential for maintaining data integrity and compliance with technical regulations. These protocols must always account for the specific requirements of each jurisdiction involved in the transfer, especially for purposes of audit. Number four is the technical skills and expertise. And we discussed this as part of data protection for SMEs, where one of the challenges was the shortage of skilled IT professionals that or having the ability to retain skilled IT professionals. So the successful implementation of a cross-border data transfers requires a high level of technical expertise, particularly in areas of cybersecurity, network management, as well as data compliance. It may be, however, there might be a shortage of skilled professionals in some regions, making it very challenging for businesses to build and maintain the necessary infrastructure in various jurisdictions. So, how to navigate this is to invest in training and development to overcome this challenge, and ensuring that all the teams in all the countries that you have presence in are well equipped to manage cybersecurity incidents and also manage cross-border data transfers. We emphasize this a lot, and it has been a topic in all our webinars in this series, and it is the need for continuous training and development. So given the rapid pace of technological advancements, IT professionals need to engage in continuous learning and stay up to date with the latest developments in data protection, encryption, cross-border data protocols, and any other legislation. So organizations must prioritize the ongoing training and professional development to ensure that their teams can effectively manage technical challenges associated with cross-border data transfers. Let's look at some scenarios. So we have a scenario of a large Nigerian bank that regularly transfers sensitive financial data between its headquarters in Lagos and its data processing center, which is located in Europe. So this data includes transaction details, customer account information, as well as financial reports. One of the challenges the bank will face is a technical challenge of ensuring that all data is transferred between these locations. It is also encrypted and is compliant with both the Nigerian law as well as GDPR. So the solution here is the bank implements an end-to-end encryption for all data transfers using an advanced encryption standard, which is AES 512, to protect the data in transit. So the bank also establishes secure key management that stores encryption keys in a hardware security module, ensuring that keys are protected and that access is tightly controlled. Another scenario is a tech company that has infrastructure compatibility issues. So a tech company that has a cloud-based service plan and plans to deploy multiple countries, including Nigeria, South Africa, and the United States. However, this company encounters technical issues relating to infrastructure compatibility as the cloud platforms and network standards differ across these regions. The company needs to ensure that the service can operate smoothly across the different cloud environments, networks, and data centers, despite the varying infrastructure. And this is their biggest challenge. The solution around this is to invest in cloud agnostic architecture that allows its service to run on multiple cloud environments such as AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Workspace. And this also allows DevOps to customize APIs and middleware to bridge the gaps between various different network protocols and systems to ensure that data is moving very seamlessly. There's also an e-commerce platform with customers in Africa, Europe, Asia, and needs to transact customer data across these borders to provide personalized shopping experiences, process their payments, and also manage their logistics. And an example of this is Alibaba or AliExpress. So the high data latency affects the platform's ability to deliver real-time personalized recommendations, process orders quickly, and provide a seamless user experience. So the platform implements a content delivery network, cache all data closer to different users in different regions so as to reduce the distance that the data needs to travel and improve the data transfer speeds. Another scenario is a multinational manufacturing company and data residency compliance issues. So a company that has operations in Russia, China, and the United States needs to comply with data latency laws that require certain data to be stored and processed within specific countries. So the company faces the technical challenge of managing data storage across multiple jurisdictions while maintaining a centralized control and access to the data. So the challenge is that the company must navigate the complexities of data residency laws that differ country to country, ensuring that data is locally stored where required without compromising on operational efficiency. So the company decides that local data centers, to have local data centers in Russia and in China so as to comply with the data residency requirements, and also deploys a federated data management system that allows for centralized control and monitoring of data across various locations. This now ensures that the company can access and manage data in compliance with the local regulations in Russia and China, while still maintaining operational efficiency. So operational challenges are the ones which are the most common. And because managing cross-border data transfers involves several operational challenges that businesses must address to ensure smooth, secure, and efficient operations. So this can impact the cost, the speed, and the effectiveness of data transfers, making it essential for organizations to develop robust strategies to manage them. The first operational headache is managing data transfers across multiple jurisdictions, where we see the complexity of ensure that you're complying with multiple jurisdictions, and also having to coordinate across different legal as well as cultural environments. We also see a headache in cost implication of cross-border data transfers, and this is because of the operational cost of having data centers in multiple locations, as well as the need to allocate resources and manage various jurisdictions to ensure that data is being transferred seamlessly. There's a headache of data governance and control. Maintaining data integrity and accuracy while you do not have the ability to get that data very correctly from another country is the biggest headache that most of the companies face. And ensuring that this data has, you can access it and is available to you at any particular time is one of the operational challenges because of power issues in a specific country where there's always power blackouts. So in the location that your company is in is always facing power blackouts. So you need to invest in a generator to ensure that there's power, and this is an operational efficiency that you need to take into account. There's also the cultural and organizational challenges. And these are very unique because navigating various different organizational cultures and in different regions may have varied approaches to data management, influenced by their local business practices, regulatory environments, and cultural attitudes towards privacy. An example is a country like Somalia, where they believe in a lot of information sharing, yet you're trying to ensure that you're securing your data, and therefore you're very hesitant to transfer your data in and out of a country that does not have a law, and the culture there is not to keep secrets from each other. So how do you navigate this other than having employee awareness and ensuring that there's a lot of training? So the cost of training and always ensuring employee awareness programs becomes so high for an organization that it becomes very difficult to continue operation. Some of the practical examples and scenarios that we were able to research was we have an example of a global pharmaceutical company managing data compliance across multiple jurisdictions. And this is a company that has conducted clinical trials in several countries, such as US, Germany, Kenya, and Uganda. The company needs to transfer this sensitive patient data across borders so as to have a centralized database for data analysis and to comply with regulatory reporting requirements. So this company has very many headaches. So they have GDPR in Europe, there's HIPAA for United States, and also any institution that is managing health data, and also the Kenya Data Protection Act, as well as the Uganda Data Protection Act. And each of these jurisdictions have various requirements on consent, on storage, on transfer, which makes it very difficult to create a unified data management process or a unified centralized database. So the company has to implement a global data governance framework that incorporates the strictest elements of each regulation, which include encryption, data transfers, and ensuring that all the data is always anonymized before it is transferred. And where necessary, they need to obtain explicit consent from the patient before they transfer this data outside the borders so as to avoid legal penalties. We have another scenario of a multinational retailer who is facing high operational costs in cross-border data transfers. And this is because this company has operations in Asia, Europe, Africa, and the retailer regularly transfers large volumes of customer data, inventory information in and around its global headquarters located in China. So the cost of managing these cross-border transfers has become increasingly burdensome, particularly due to the various regional data protection laws, as well as the high bandwidth that they need to pay for in each and every country. So the only solution for such a company is to conduct a cost-benefit analysis to identify the opportunities for cost savings, and therefore it decides to consolidate its data storage by using cloud services that are compliant with multiple regional jurisdictions, as well as reducing the need for maintaining separate data centers in each region. Another scenario is a global logistics company struggling with data governance and control. And a lot of companies struggle with this. So a company that has operations in North America, Canada, Europe, and Asia manages vast amounts of shipment data, tracking information, and customer details across its big global network. And this company needs to ensure that the data remains accurate, secure, and accessible to its teams in the various different regions. So the logistics company struggles with maintaining data integrity and control as data is transferred across borders. This is because there's differences in data formats, inconsistency in data handling practices. An example being the date format in one country is DDMMYYY, and another country is MMDDYYY. So when you run that data into your environment, it distorts the integrity of the data and the accuracy aspects of that data. Just because a specific jurisdiction, when it's sharing their data, they do not conform to your the centralized location. The company needs to implement a robust data governance framework and standardize all data formats, processes, and handling practices across all its regions so as to ensure that the data integrity aspect is not compromised. It also invests in a centralized data management platform that provides real-time visibility and control over its global data operations. There's a tech startup that is expanding globally and managing resource allocation. And this tech-based tech startup is based in Nairobi and is expanding its operations into the European market. And this startup needs to transfer customer data, marketing analytics, and product information across the borders to its new European office. However, the startup faces a challenge of managing its limited resources, particularly in terms of IT infrastructure, skilled personnel, and legal expertise. So the challenge is that the startup must ensure that it has the necessary resources to manage secure and compliant cross-border data transfers while operating on a tight budget. So the solution the startup decides to do is to select a company that has multi professional experience and also multi-locational, such as BDO, to ensure that they centralize and they manage the data protection practices because they leverage on their expertise on various countries. So this is more or less outsource the headache to a company that can be able to manage the multi-jurisdictional headache, the multi-environment headache, and also the multi-infrastructure headache. Now that we have looked at some of the challenges, let's look at some steps to achieve compliance. So again, we're focusing on the legal compliance, the technical solutions, as well as the operational solutions. So under the legal compliance, we emphasize that you must conduct comprehensive legal assessments of all the jurisdictions that you are currently operating in or hoping to expand into. You also need to utilize standard clauses, contractual clauses, and binding corporate rules so as to ensure that all the information and exchange process is governed by consistent rules and regulations that are more or less internal. You need to perform data protection impact assessments and ensure that you establish a standardized DPIA format for your organization that operates in different jurisdictions. You also need to review and update your DPIAs as regularly as possible to always take into account any changes that occur in either the processing activities or the regulatory requirements. In some instances, you must obtain consent and ensure transparency. So you must clearly inform the individuals about how their data is going to be used, stored, and transferred across these borders. You must obtain explicit and informed consent from data subjects where required by law, ensuring that they understand their rights, and this has to be in plain and simple language that they can understand. Most likely has to be hard-coded or hard written so that it can be recorded and can be used for transparency purposes. From a technical standpoint, you must implement strong encryption protocols in data in transit as well as data at rest. To do this, you need to integrate encryption solutions to all your data and all your storage systems. You need to ensure that you establish protocols for encryption, especially key lifecycle management, including the generation, distribution, rotation, and revocation of writes, as well as periodic security assessment and conducting penetration tests on your environments to ensure that the encryption validations are effective and are current. You need to employ secure and reliable data transfer protocols. And this is, you need to utilize secure protocols such as HTTPS or SFTP, which is a secure file transfer protocol, and also in some cases, virtual private networks, VPNs, to ensure that data integrity and confidentiality during transmission is maintained. You also need to optimize infrastructure and efficiency and resilience. So for this, you need to leverage on content delivery networks and edge computing to reduce latency and improve data transfer speeds. You also need to design infrastructure with redundancy in mind to have failovers to ensure that continuity and availability aspects of your environment in case of a power disruption or even a network failure. You also need to conduct regular security audits and assessments. We have emphasized this over the series, and we re-emphasize it again today, is you need to perform frequent security audits to identify and remediate any vulnerabilities in your systems and processes, especially those systems that are involved in cross-border data transfers. For this, you need to establish a schedule for regular internal and external security audits, develop a VAPT process that prioritizes and identifies the risks promptly, and allocate resources for continuous monitoring and improvement. On the operational side of things, effective operational strategies are crucial to managing the day-to-day aspects of cross-border data transfers, and these practices help streamline operations so as to foster a culture of data protection. Number one is we need to develop and enforce a comprehensive data governance structure. This includes having clear and comprehensive policies outlining how data is collected, processed, stored, and transferred across borders. You also need to define roles and responsibilities for data management, including data owners, the data stewards, as well as the data protection officers, and also ensuring policies are documented, accessible, and reviewed regularly to ensure that any changes in operations or in regulations in the jurisdictions that they exist in are taken into account. You need to provide regular training and awareness programs to staff. Educate all employees at all levels about data protection principles, regulations, and best practices related to cross-border data transfers. You need to conduct regular training sessions and workshops and have awareness campaigns to reinforce the importance of data security and monitoring. You also need to tailor your training content to different roles and regions so as to address specific challenges and the requirements of a specific region. You also need to enforce and establish robust incident response and management plans. So developing clear protocols and identifying, reporting, and responding to data breaches, especially for security incidents related to cross-border data transfers, is very crucial towards the operational continuity. So you need to create a detailed incident response plan and playbook that outlines the various steps to take during any type of security incident, especially a data breach for data in transit. You need to set up communication plans for notifying the various stakeholders, including the customers, as well as the regulatory authorities in case of a breach. You also need to review and update the incident response plans. You can also leverage on technology and innovation. How do you do this? You implement privacy enhancing technologies, PETs, such as differential privacy, homomorphic encryption, and also ensuring secure multi-party computation to protect data, especially during processing and analysis. You also need to assess the organizational needs for implementing the appropriate PETs that need to be implemented. There's also the aspect of adopting AI and for purposes of compliance. We covered this in part 4 of our series under the emerging technologies and data protection, and how AI and ML tools can automate the compliance monitoring process, automate the data classification, as well as automatically detect any anomalies within data transfers without you having to be involved. You need to deploy AI-driven compliance tools and continuously monitor and refine your AI models as to improve the accuracy and efficiency. We spoke about the key tools. We'll just touch on them again. You need to implement tools for data protection software solutions, such as data loss prevention tools, and you can also do privacy impact assessment tools, which are examples such as OneTrust, TrustArc, and Nimity privacy management tools. You can also use data mapping and inventory tools. The easiest one is managing this on Excel. However, if you can also leverage on tools such as Data Gravity or even Data Inventory to visualize and document all your data flows. For training purposes, you can either take up free training courses on Udemy or on LinkedIn so as to improve on the awareness levels within your organization, or you can also go for privacy courses such as the IAPP, which is the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and these are certain courses. Here in Kenya, we have CIPIT offered at Strathmore University. There's also compliance frameworks and guidelines. You need to also apply various frameworks over and above your data protection framework. And this is either the ISO 27001, 2777001, the NIST, the NIST 800 series framework, and any other frameworks that are accessible to your organization. To develop various data breach response plans. You can then take into account the NIST framework for how to report and document a data response plan. And there are many other solutions that exist which can leverage you can leverage within your organization first to implement a robust data protection framework and secure your cross-data transfers. So there are various mechanisms that we have outlined today. Number one being the SCC, which is the standard contractual clauses, and this go as part of your operational contract with the company within your company, and it's country to country. So what are data transfer mechanisms? So data transfer mechanisms are legal and technical frameworks that enable the movement of personal data across national borders while ensuring compliance with applicable data protection laws. They're important to ensure compliance, mitigate risk, as well as facilitate the ability to perform global operations. So what are SCCs? SCCs are pre-approved legal contracts that include standard data protection clauses mandated by the EU, and these clauses can be a lawful basis for the transfer of personal data from the European Economic Area to any country outside the EU or the EEA that do not have adequacy decision. So you use SCCs when you're transferring data between an EEA-based company and a non-EEA-based company, or a company that has processes in an EU environment and a non-EU environment. It is also very used for companies that have are a data processor or a data controller that lacks the adequacy decisions. Businesses must ensure that SCCs are incorporated into their contracts, especially with third-party vendors and partners involved in data processing. There's also binding corporate rules. So BCRs, binding corporate rules, are internal codes of conduct adopted by multinational companies to ensure that intergroup transfers of personal data comply with EU data standards as well as other jurisdictional standards. So BCRs must be approved by at least an approved EU data protection authority. So key considerations here is that the approval process for obtaining the BCR can be time-consuming and complex, so you need to prepare that very early, and also the consistency aspect. So BCRs provide a consistent framework for data protection across all your entities within the company, regardless of their geographic location, as long as they are approved by an EU authority. The key other aspect is adequacy decisions. So adequacy decisions is a formal decision by the European Commission that a non-European EU country provides the level of data protection that is essentially equivalent to that of the EU. And also this applies to the Malabo Convention. So all the countries that have signed and implemented the Malabo Convention have what is included as an adequacy decision, meaning that you can transfer data from that country to another within your company. Use this when you're transferring. Adequacy decisions are the most simplest mechanisms for transferring data across countries, as they eliminate the need for additional contracts and approvals, such as controller agreements, processor agreements, as well as cross-border agreements, which we'll get to. There used to be the privacy shield, but this was superseded by the EU's SCC, standard contractual clauses. And after 2016, then once the GDPR came into play, then SCCs took over and the privacy shield aspect was eliminated. There is also data transfer agreements. So cross-border data transfer agreements are customized contracts that outline the terms and conditions for transferring data between entities across borders. These agreements include the data protection clauses that align with the applicable laws and regulations. So you use data transfer agreements between bespoke companies and organizations that require specific data protection measures beyond the standard clauses. So instead of issuing standard clause SCC outward and also receiving one inward, you develop a data transfer agreement to safeguard the transfer of data across the situations. The last but not least is that you have to obtain explicit consent. So in areas where consent is mandatory, you need to obtain consent specifically for that data processing activity. And there are various tools for obtaining consent and maintaining a register of all the consent that has been collected. Let's recap our webinar today. So these are the key takeaways from today's webinar. We have explored the complexities of cross-border data transfers, focusing on the challenges and best practices for managing these transfers effectively. We looked at the importance of cross-border data transfers, where we discussed how cross-border data transfers are crucial for enabling business operations, support also cloud computing, foster innovation, enhance customer experience, and ensuring compliance with international regulations. We then looked at the legal challenges, examined the complex legal landscape, highlighting the need to navigate different international frameworks such as the GDPR or the Malabo Convention, and handle compliance complexities that mitigate legal risks through mechanisms such as the SCCs and the PCRs. We looked at the technical challenges and delved into technical hurdles such as security, cybersecurity risks, infrastructure inconsistencies, as well as compliance in varying technical standards. And we emphasized the importance of strong encryption, secure protocols, regular audits, and regular VAPTs. And operational challenges, we covered the operational complexities, including managing your costs effectively, ensuring data governance, and overcoming cultural differences. Effective data governance, consistent training, as well as cross-cultural collaboration were highlighted as the essential strategies to beat this operational challenge. We wrapped up by presenting some comprehensive solutions in and around legal, technical, and operational domains, including the use of advanced technologies, robust compliance frameworks, as well as continuous management and improvement mechanisms. Finally, we explored the different mechanisms available for legal data transfers, such as SCCs, BCRs, as well as adequacy decisions. And we also touched on having to collect explicit consent, which now provides guidance on how to use each one of them. As we navigate these complexities of cross-border data transfers, remember that staying informed is proactive and key. And by leveraging on the right tools, maintaining strong governance, fostering a culture of compliance and innovation, the organization can turn these challenges into opportunities for growth and success on a global scale. Stay vigilant, stay compliant, and keep pushing the boundaries on what is possible in this interconnected world. By embracing these key takeaways and adopting a holistic approach to data protection compliance, organizations can build trust with its stakeholders, mitigate legal risks, and thrive in the increasingly data-driven landscape across the world. This brings us to the end of the webinar and the end of the series. And I'd like to hand over back to Meha to run through some of the questions in the chat. And over to you, Meha.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to Paul Macharia for organizing this entire series from part 1 to part 5. And if any of you missed any parts of the series, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've uploaded every single webinar from this entire series. We haven't seen any questions so far, so I'll give you all a few minutes to ask any questions relating to data privacy from the previous webinars that you may have missed or from this webinar. We'll give you a few minutes, and then we also have a poll at the end of this webinar just to get some feedback. So I don't see any questions. I've shared the webinar feedback survey, so please fill it in, and if any questions pop up, please type them in the Q&A tab, and Paul will be ready to answer any of your questions. And I'd also like to announce that we have a data analytics webinar series starting next week. So please keep a lookout in your email inbox and also our LinkedIn page for the registration link. So we do have one question. Thank you, Hannah, for submitting your question. It asks, what should a hospital with non-resident patients, foreigners, look out for, especially in terms of their insurance contracts?
Right. Thank you, Hannah. This is a very interesting question. So, as a hospital, you'd need to comply to HIPAA for data protection, as well as the jurisdiction. I'm guessing that maybe this I'll take it in the context of Kenya. So, whenever you are collecting data from non-resident patients, you need to first inform them that you're collecting data about them. And also, you need to classify their data and perform DPIAs selectively on the data that you're collecting. So a DPIA would be able to identify if this particular resident is from the EU. So what you look out for is under the EU standards, what are the bare minimums for collection, notification, storage, and transmission of data? If you take care of the 4 of them, you have already tackled that first headache. In terms of the insurance contracts, now you need to safeguard yourself with the legal instruments that we have included. Number 1 being the SCCs, the standard contractual clauses. They need to take into account data protection with regards to collection, storage, transmission, as well as retention of data, because data retention is very critical. Number 2 is consent. In cases of sensitive personal data and transmission, you need to obtain explicit consent to transmit this data. It's not explicit to store it or collect it, but explicit consent to transmit this data to a third party. You also need to safeguard yourself against the third parties by ensuring that you have either controller to processor agreements, data sharing agreements, and if they're outside this country, an additional cross-border data transfer agreement. So there are various aspects. It's not a one size fits all. It has to be very conceptualized and in context to a very specific example. But what I have mentioned is you need to take into account all those aspects, from consent to storage to having agreements with third parties to even having a secure system that is HIPAA compliant. So your system vendor has to be HIPAA compliant. The insurance system, especially if it's a health management system, needs to also be subjected to HIPAA compliance. That you leverage on the first level. Second level is to ensure that your environments are always under scrutiny, either from regular audits and conducting multiple VAPTs on the environments and keeping all the infrastructure up to date. I think that answers that question. Is there any other question, Meha? We have a question from Lee Well. How would a payroll company better secure payroll data shared via email even after encrypting relevant documents when sharing? So payroll data is considered to be sensitive data because it combines personal identifiable information as well as financial information, as well as banking details, and more. Payroll data is basically gold in the global hacking space. So over and above encrypting your data, you need to also ensure that if you're transmitting it, it has to be through an SFTP or through a HTTPS protocol. One that ensures that the data is not stolen in transit or even purged in transit to against things like SQL injection. So your email platform, you need to have secure protocols. If you have an in-house mail server, then you'd have to implement very secure protocols. But if you're using a third party such as Microsoft or Google, that is usually taken care of for and on your behalf. The encryption protocol comes by default. But over and above that is to tokenize the email. So you send the first attachment being the payroll, and then the second attachment being the decryption key. So the first one is the encryption key, the second one is the encryption key, decryption key. So whoever is receiving this has to have both emails or both tokens so as to be able to access this data. Over and above that, you can zip it in a zip file. These are now the easy ways of doing things. You can zip it in a zip file and have it password protected, where it automatically deletes the data if you attempt maybe 3 or 4 times. You're the ones who set that. And additionally, I think last but not least on that aspect is you just implement a data loss privacy tool that can be able to classify data in the various categories, so such as public, internal, or private and confidential. So if you send it if it is classified as private and confidential, it is from one mailbox to the only mailbox that you are sending it to. So even if that person wants to send that document to another person within the same company or even outside the organization, then the email will automatically be blocked from being sent as long as the category is placed as PNC. There's another question. Hospital is a data processor or controller. Can you outline the data collection point in a hospital? What are the key documents in a hospital setup that need to comply to DPA on priority? Again, is this in the context of Kenya? I just want maybe Charles Wasike to explain if this is in the context of Kenya. But while you do that, the difference between a processor and a controller is a controller is someone who makes decisions about the final processing activity, whereas a processor is a person who acts only for and on behalf of the controller. So in this case, a hospital, as long as you're the one collecting the data, you are a data controller. If you're getting this data from an insurance company only for purposes of providing the details about the claim, then you are a processor for and on behalf of the insurance company. So as a hospital, you are primarily a controller because you collect patient data, lab details, medical details, next of kin details, and many more details. Hospitals actually collect a lot of data. So in this case, you are a controller. So all the data collection points need to be taken through a DPIA. The first being triage and maybe the first bit, which is cashier or the first ticket that you get in the hospital. before you even go into consultation. So a DPIA must be performed against all the forms and all the data points that are collected at that particular stage. At that stage, there's very minimal information that you need to collect. You just need probably the name of that person, an ID number, KYC-based information. At that particular stage, you do not need to collect information financially related because they are yet to move into the consultation room to get billed, and also maybe they need to go to labs to get billed, and also maybe pharmacy to get medicine, which is also financial. So that all these stages where a patient data is being moved from one collection point to another must be subjected to a DPIA, and all the high-risk processing activities must be given higher priority in terms of security. So, for example, at the collection point, you can collect all the data as is in text format, but when it's moving across the system and across the hospital, you obfuscate some of the details. So if it's a second name and you only use the first name and the last name, if it's a mobile number, you only show the first 4 digits and the last 3 digits, the rest are asterisks, so as to continuously avoid if this information was to be breached while in transit throughout the hospital. This is internal transit. Then you cannot be able to use that information to identify an individual because you've either obfuscated the information, truncated the information, or encrypted it in plain sight using asterisks. How can an organization regulate the use of AI for work-related tasks? With regards to data protection, you need to come up with an AI policy. The first bit, there's an international standard that is currently being developed, which will be an ISO standard in the 2 series, which is primarily to regulate AI. And it doesn't just touch on generative AI, it also touches on predictive AI. So stay on the lookout for that. We will be doing a series on that in the later stages of the year. So how do you regulate it is to have very strict protocols internally on when to use AI and how to use AI. So for example, you're running, you have an organization of 140 people, 150 people, and you're planning a team building. And you want to ensure that the selection of the teams, you want to split the teams into 10. So you're using a database that has names, has their departments, has their ages, has their sizes, and also other details. So when you're committing to use AI to split this data for you, the data protection policy should ensure enshrine the aspects of data minimization as a principle. So instead of sharing 3 names, you share 1 name. Instead of sharing the full name of the department, you can use the abbreviations or the first letter of that department. Instead of sharing the sizes of these people or the ages of these people, you can randomize it and have it encrypted inward and outward. You can also use multiple queries. So you subject the first data set into one query and for processing activities, then resubject it to an additional query while still on the AI. So AI minimization, data minimization is a key principle to ensure that your policies are airtight on how you use AI in your organization. There's also some questions in the Q&A. Today we have so many questions. We have a question that if a chest image of a patient is taken and needs to be transferred out of the country, but there is no other part of the image that can be used to identify the patient, there are no patient identifiers written on the image, as this is considered personal data and has to be governed. Is this considered as personal data and has to be governed under data protection law? So this is an X-ray image, so this is exempt. But if it was an image of a person, then it would be subjected. So as an X-ray image, which you've rightfully indicated does not have the name of the patient or any other details. So how you safeguard yourself is you send this chest image or this X-ray in a separate email. I think you mentioned email, or through the system. then the details should then be moved through encryption, or you can encrypt this particular image to ensure that you protect the details. If someone was to get two matching the image itself against the details of the patient, then definitely you would have breached HIPAA laws. Let me check the Q&A tab now. Would transferring data from one cloud platform, this is from Jacob, would transferring data from one cloud platform to another, e.g. Salesforce to Google Suite, be considered cross-border data transfer since there's the possibility of the data centers being in different countries? If so, are there additional steps organizations can or should take beyond the inbuilt controls on the respective cloud platforms? So the simplest answer to this is you have no real control over the fact that you're using Google Suite or Salesforce, because you have covered, or you are actually covered by the standard clauses. So the portability aspect of moving to cloud ensures that you can have multiple storage locations. So the only way you can also additionally safeguard yourself is to ensure that you train your employees internally on use of platforms and the use of exchange of data from one platform to another, especially if you're going to use the two systems in parallel, or you're about to have a changeover of 3 months. So one way to secure yourself in this instance is, one, the third-party contract, whoever is the implementing factor or the implementing company, you need to safeguard yourself against data. So you have to have a very strong third-party agreement and a data sharing agreement with that particular organization. Within the standard terms of contract with these big companies, Microsoft, Google, AWS, there's always the standard clauses, the SECs, that are implemented or are implemented by default. And you just need to read through the fine print and confirm that they are there. For less reputable organizations, maybe you'd need to subject them to a BCR, binding corporate rules, which ideally should ensure that they protect your data for and on your behalf. In terms of a hospital processing claims on behalf of insurance claims, please explain further, because insurance companies would also require further information from the hospital in terms of diagnosis to know what is included in the terms of claims. So this is a headache that has been addressed several times with regards to transfer of information, especially between hospitals and insurance companies. And in some cases, consent has to be sought from a data subject before data is transmitted, especially if it's very sensitive. However, there's an aspect of legitimate interest. The purpose of processing is applied is legitimate interest, whereby for the insurance company to provide an insurance claim to a data subject, they have already given them the authority to process data. By me choosing to go to a specific hospital and use my insurance card in that hospital, it is the legitimate interest of that hospital to give medical care to data subjects who have plans with specific organizations, insurance organizations. So the legitimate interest aspect comes into play here, and therefore consent is not necessary. And in the sense of processing claims, what you need to do between we are looking at maybe the smart system, or and mostly smart access is the most common one. So the details are being transmitted through smart access, which is a platform. What you need to ensure is all the requests, and the smart access is an SFTP. So you do not then send these emails outward or haphazardly by copying so many people. You can also password protect the various information that is being requested from you, and you issue a password in a separate email, but always strive to use the SFTP, the Secure File Transfer Protocol, between your organization and the insurance company. We are seeing this a lot in banks and credit reference bureaus, where only information can be transmitted through the portal, which is a file transfer protocol, SFTP. So develop a portal, and most of these insurance companies have portals where the requests are made straight through the portal, and therefore not exactly via email. And only on email is where they would do clarifications and sometimes phone calls. Always insist on the use of the portal or the SFTP that you have implemented. Charles confirms that this is Kenya. So we addressed it in a Kenyan context, where the question was, let me just go back to the question. Please organize a webinar on the hospital compliance with DPA. Thank you so much. I think we'd have a lot of content on this, and we've taken this down to ensure that we will have, in a part of our next series, we will cover data protection for specific in the health sector or the health industry, which will now cover hospitals, insurance companies, brokers, and other third-party agents. I do not believe there is another question. This is your last chance to get free advice in data protection matters, as we have now closed part 5 until we revive the next series. I'd say thank you so much for those who have been part of this journey. We have learned a lot from you, as well as we enjoyed providing information to you. And remember that other than the 5 topics we've covered, you can always send us through the survey that we've just posted on the chat box, and it popped up on your screens. You can indicate the various topics that you want us to cover in our next series, regardless of the department. So it could be audit, tax, advisory, or even BSO. Just let us know, and we will organize that invite and that webinar within the next series. With that, I'd like to bring the series to a close. Thank you all for those who managed to join today's webinar, as well as those who have been with us from the word go. Your engagement and thoughtful questions have made it a truly enriching experience. As we conclude, remember that our commitment to knowledge sharing doesn't end here, and you should follow us on our social media pages, YouTube, LinkedIn, to get early access to these webinars, as well as to review past webinars that we've conducted in the recent past. Thank you and have a great day.